Okay, good morning again. I hope you did have a good night's rest and are ready for today. I think we have quite a lot of stuff on our plate. First, I would like to make two announcements. First, please, if you have speaking notes ready to be read out, please send them to the Secretariat under info@cites.org so that the interpreters can have your statements at hand. Because sometimes when we read things, we may go a bit quick and maybe we don't get understood very well. So for the interpreters, it's very hard to then give a correct translation. So please send your speaking notes to the Secretariat under info@cites.org so that they can convey them to the interpreters. Then the second note, I have added one organization to two working groups. This organization, their flight was cancelled. They were not able to be present yesterday. It is EASA, the European Association of Zoos and Aquariums, and I have added them to the working group membership of RST and specimens not of wild source. This doesn't skew the participation, so it's not a problem for parties and or organizations. With this, I would then go on to agenda item 46, report of the specialist on zoological nomenclature. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Document AC 46 presents information on nomenclatural matters that were referred to the Animals Committee by the parties at COP19, as well as the usual background activities under Resolution 12.11 on standard nomenclature. At COP19, the parties revised decisions 18.310 and 18.312 directed to the Animals Committee concerning the use of time-specific versions of online databases, specifically the Secretariat's efforts to arrange access to and extracts from a variety of databases that may serve as standard nomenclature references for CITES. Recent progress concerning these tasks is briefly summarized in paragraphs 3 and 4. The Secretariat will provide an oral update on progress towards its implementation of decisions 18.309 and 18.311. At COP19, the parties also adopted a set of decisions concerning the nomenclature of African elephants, of which decision 19.276 is directed to the Animals Committee. Accordingly, a brief review of the taxonomic and nomenclatural history of African elephants is presented in paragraphs 7 to 9, and a summary history of pertinent CITES deliberations in paragraph 10. In a nutshell, elephant taxonomists have progressively accepted that the forest elephant, Loxodonta cyclotis, represents a separate species distinct from the savanna elephant, Loxodonta africana. When this was first considered in CITES in 2007, the parties were reluctant to adopt this species split, which was quite novel at the time. Accumulated scientific information over the past 15 years has reinforced this two-species taxonomic perspective within the biological and conservation community, and the question to the committee and to the parties at large is whether the time has come for CITES to join the Convention on Migratory Species, IUCN Red List and others in accepting two elephant species to occur in Africa. In the case that the committee concludes that the recognition of two species in the genus Loxodonta is warranted, we will need to make a recommendation on adopting an updated nomenclature standard reference for African elephants. Paragraph 11 sets out two options to update their nomenclature standard reference, one being to accept the general nomenclatural standard reference for mammals in CITES, being Wilson and Reeder 2005. The other option is to adopt a more recent taxonomic publication, and further options may be possible. Clearly, further consideration by the committee is needed. Concerning the overdue updating of the standard nomenclature references for CITES listed birds, progress was made between COP 18 and 19, but not enough to conclude the matter at COP 19 by adopting the HBW BirdLife International Illustrated Checklist of the birds of the world. Further work needs to be done to fully review the implications for CITES of such an adoption. And as noted in paragraphs 14 to 16, this can hopefully be completed in time for review at our next Animals Committee meeting. One particular aspect to consider at this time concerns the fact that the editors of this checklist publish an annual update to the checklist, tabulating taxonomic and nomenclatural changes accepted by the editors of the checklist. While there may be merit in adopting these supplementary tables of amendments to the published checklist, some of the more recent updates may still be reversed by ongoing taxonomic research, and minimizing such taxonomic churn in CITES is important, so perhaps only a selection or no supplements at all could be recommended for adoption at a particular time. This needs further deliberation. Under Resolution 12.11 on standard nomenclature, the nomenclature specialists of both committees are instructed to make recommendations for the adoption of updated checklists. For groups where no comprehensive books or journal articles are available, extracts from online databases have been used to good effect for many groups. Annex 1, for example, represents a proposed standard nomenclature reference for the lizard genus Phrynosoma, which was included in Appendix 2 at COP19. Other standard references are needed that will be based on extracts from online databases, including for amphibians, fishes, and marine invertebrates. Before starting the extraction of information from online databases, however, the Secretariat and nomenclature specialists would be grateful for the views of the committee, parties, and observers on exactly how comprehensive and detailed such database extracts should be, so that they are most useful to the parties in implementing the convention. As well as updating group-wide checklists, Resolution 12.11 also instructs us to keep track of taxonomic and nomenclatural changes for individual CITES-listed species. And Annexes 2 and 3 to the present document tabulate cases that have come to our attention since the 31st meeting online, as well as cases where we did not come to a conclusion at the 31st online meeting. I seek the input of the committee, parties and observers in reviewing which changes to recommend for adoption by the parties at the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. This is a slow, deliberate review process that is best suited to an intersessional working group, working by email or other communication means, and reporting to our 33rd meeting. Finally, the case of the channel-billed toucan, currently named Ramphastos vitellinus citriolemus in CITES, was brought to our attention, and this is described in paragraph 25. Very briefly, this taxon was considered a separate species when a limited number of specific toucan species were included in Appendix 2 in 1992, and this particular species, or this particular taxon, was not included. However, subsequently, it was taxonomically reduced to a subspecies of a CITES-listed species, meaning this subspecies is now CITES-listed. Paragraph 25 argues that this was not the intent of the parties at the time, and therefore the listing in the appendices should be restricted to the typical subspecies Ramphastos vitellinus and exclude the subspecies Ramphastos vitellinus citriolemus. Dear Chair, given the amount of work ahead of us, I recommend establishing a working group that meets in session at this meeting to deliberate on some of these topics, as well as having a continuing intersessional mandate to bring the initial deliberations to a satisfactory close, as well as adequately reviewing the annexes that tabulate possible nomenclature updates. And with this, I come to the end of this long introduction. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Nomenclature Specialist, for that introduction and your suggestion for working groups. I tend to agree, of course. But first, I would like to give the floor to the Secretary to provide an update. So, Secretary, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. In implementation of Decision 18.309 and 18.311, the Secretariat, with the assistance of the Nomenclature Specialist, have been in discussion with the Chair and Vice Chair of the Steering Committee of the World Register of Marine Species, or otherwise known as WORMS, with regard to receiving a timestamp version of the database for use as a standard nomenclature reference. The discussion revealed that downloading the relevant standard nomenclature reference as a PDF might not be possible, and an Excel form file or a CSV file would be more appropriate for the amount of information to be downloaded. In order to receive the timestamp versions of the database, a legal agreement needs to be made between the Secretariat and WORMS, and the Secretariat is in the process of developing an internal data policy framework to inform agreements related to data, including the use of timestamp databases. The Secretariat will continue to work with the nomenclature specialists to liaise with the steering committee of WORMS as a data policy framework is developed to implement decisions 18.309 and 18.311. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. With this, just to note that we will have a working group, in-session working group, because I don't think we can deal with all the issues in plenary. But with this, I would then open the floor for comments from members of the Animals Committee. First. Yeah, I see Africa. Africa, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if I'm speaking as Senegal, as the representative of Senegal, or as the alternate for all of Africa, but I think that these issues are extremely complex. The nomenclature specialist said as much, especially as regards the elephant. I think the adoption of the new nomenclature with two separate species would have a lot of implications for the conservation status and the implementation of the convention in the ranges of these species. You said, I know that we're going to have an intercession group. I think that's better. We don't have all the necessary information to take a decision here because these issues, as I said, are very complex and bear implications for our countries, especially. And I think it would be good to refer this to an intersessional working group which could pursue this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Africa. Yes, I think that's exactly the aim of what we will be doing, because I think now to decide on this is too early. We need to have more deliberations, especially around the taxonomy of African elephant. So with this, I open the floor for comments from observer parties. I see Mexico. Mexico, you have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. Mexico would like to thank the nomenclature specialist for the documented exceptional work, and we congratulate him on his work and dedication. At this opportunity, Mexico will not be able to participate in the working group, so we'd be grateful if the Animals Committee and the specialist could take into account our comments during their considerations on the nomenclature of the Phrynosoma nomenclature. We support the use of the IUCN lists, which is in line with the nomenclature that was used for the proposed amendment for horned lizards, and the 2019 to 2021 work, which represents change for 3 Mexican species. When it comes to land tortoises and marine turtles, we support the recommendation by IUCN, but we think that in 2023, as mentioned in the document, we should take into account the updates. We're also in agreement with the updates for nomenclature for species which are in Mexico, and they're in line with our national references. We also consider that the illustrated birds listing should be decided once BirdLife have completed their updating, and we can look and see the effects that it will have on the implementation of the convention. Adopting them each year or an additional element for each one could create extra work. So we think it should be considered at each COP, as has been done in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Mexico. I think the nomenclature specialist has taken note of your comments if you cannot participate here. So thank you for this. Then I see Tanzania, who has asked for the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Since it is the first time Tanzania is taking the floor, we would like to align ourselves with the previous speaker in congratulating you for being re-elected as the chair of the Animal Committee, and wish you well for this position. Tanzania commends the work done by Nomenclature Specialist Group in compiling this report and the recommendation therein. Tanzania is of the opinion that since science has proven and recognized different species of African elephant, it is obvious that the two species exist in two different geographical locations and should be recognized and treated differently by CITES. We fully support the recommendation made by the committee in paragraph 27B of the present document, and we are aware of the conservation opinion behind this agenda, but we request CITES to embrace science in decision making. Tanzania will be happy in joining the in-session working group to discuss this agenda further. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanzania. I see the United States.
The United States would like to thank the specialist of the zoological nomenclature, as well as the Secretariat for pulling this document together. Given the large number of items covered in the document, as well as the complexity of some of the items, the United States strongly supports recommendation G to establish the intersessional nomenclature working group to inter alia review possible changes in nomenclature ahead of AC 33. In addition to reviewing the possible changes in nomenclature as summarized in Annex 2 and Annex 3, all other matters discussed in this document should be considered during the intersessional period and includes the use of time-specific versions of online databases, taxonomy and nomenclature of African elephants, nomenclature of bird families, as well as guidelines and checklists for standard nomenclature references for iguanids and Phrynosoma, and consideration of the deletion of the citron-throated toucan from Appendix 1 to from Appendix 2 by reducing the scope of the listing of R. vitinellus in Appendix 2 to R. vitinellus only. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. I then see DRC. DRC, you have the floor.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for giving me the floor. I'd like to thank the nomenclature specialist for preparing the document that we're considering, and very detailed document it is. My country hosts both species of Loxodonta africana. This has been recognized by the specialists. We have a wide variety of ecosystems in the east, north, and south of the country, and we support the proposal to set up an intersessional working committee to look more deeply into this nomenclature issue, and would like to take part in the group. However, my country would like to ask the specialist about the hybridization of these two species, since my country has both species. I don't know if the specialist could say whether a third species, which would be a hybrid of the other two, might be present. In Garamba National Park, we have this wide variety of ecosystems, and we have savanna elephants as well as forest elephants in that park. And we are seeing these hybrids. I don't know if they can be considered as a third species. Thank you.
Thank you, DRC. I think these are exactly the questions that need to be discussed, how we deal with hybrids if they do hybridize, and that's certainly a part of the discussion that will take place. I see Russian Federation. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. I would like to touch the basic and general question, in my opinion, which I think was missed a bit, about the use of term-specific version of online databases as a standard nomenclature references. Well, actually, the taxonomy, as any science, it is not stable. It is an everyday development object. So sometimes 2 or 3 different taxonomies has different opinions on the same species. And if previously 2 species was in one genus, next year they would be in 2 different genera according to the current situation. So I mean that if we will use only the online databases for getting information on the taxonomy of particular group, we can fall in a mistake, because some mistakes already present in the databases. So to escape this situation, I would suggest to develop, it is just a suggestion probably, a list of world-known institutions which may be taken as an expert in particular question. So if we would not to update the database every 3 years or every 5 years, it depends on the decision, we have to take the particular opinion on the taxonomy of particular group from the particular experts. That would be the solution, in my opinion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Russian Federation. I think these are exactly the kind of discussion that have been going on already quite a while around online databases. And I will, when I have heard all speakers, I will give the floor back to the nomenclature specialist to respond quickly to some of the questions that have been raised. Now I would like to turn to Israel.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, like others, we want to thank the nomenclature specialist with a very deep thank you. There's no doubt that this is a tremendous load of work for him, and we all very, very much appreciate it. There aren't very many people who would take this on, and I think this has to be emphasized how much it's important for our work and how much we appreciate it. Having said that, we would like to make a specific proposal here. We will not be able to join the working group, but we would call on the Animals Committee meeting now to prepare a notification, the Secretary to prepare a notification that should go out as soon as this meeting is over, to ask the range states of the elephants to comment on the proposal to the working group. It's quite possible that the working group will be formed with missing members of the range states, and perhaps they will give them an opportunity to contribute their opinions and their knowledge directly to that working group. It might be even useful to have this notification go out to all parties, as there may be comments by other parties that are not range states to this issue of the Loxodonta listing. As I said, we're not going to be on the working group, but we would encourage the working group also to consider the issue of perhaps listing at the genus level and seeing if that can possibly solve some of the problems of listing 2 separate species. Other than that, we wish the working group much luck in their deliberation. We look forward to seeing the results. Thank you.
Thank you, Israel. I now see
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, distinguished delegates. Zimbabwe would first want to also appreciate the work of the Nomenclature Group on this key subject. Zimbabwe appreciates the work done by the IUCN African Specialist Group in assessing and recognizing the 2 elephant species. The first split recognition of African elephants was done in 2005 publication by Wilson and Reader. It is indeed very important to ensure split assessment of these species to understand their status better and how they are affected by trade. We therefore support the intersectional working group for further deliberation on the subject and ensure adaptive and evidence-based conservation efforts for both species. Zimbabwe would like to be part of this intersectional working group if established. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Zimbabwe. Just a general note, I think we all agree. Yes, I will come to you, Cameroon, no worries. I think there's general agreement that the topic of African elephant taxonomy will have to be dealt in session and intersessionally. So I don't think we need to say more on that now in plenary. We still have other things to look at. So I would ask parties who want to say the same things now to retain themselves. I will now just give the floor to Cameroon, and then I hope we can then strike the working group. Thank you. Cameroon, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, for having given me the floor. As it's the first time that Cameroon is taking the floor, I would like to, first of all, congratulate you on your re-election as Chair of the Animals Committee, and also congratulate the Vice Chair. I'd like to thank the Secretariat and congratulate them for the organization of this meeting, and also thank and congratulate the Nomenclature Specialist. As we have heard from other states, we are fortunate enough to have both savanna and forest elephants in our country, and we would be interested in knowing more about the implications for the application and implementation of CITES with the use of 2 nomenclature references. Thank you.
Thank you, Cameroon. I see no more parties asking for the floor, so I will quickly open the floor for observer. I see Conservation Force, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I would like to briefly intervene on this issue of African science, African elephant, by saying that science is very clear. Implementation, it's another issue. I think it's outside the mandate of this committee. So it would be very important to focus on the scientific aspects of the nomenclature and not to think about the implementation. The implementation should be up to the standing committee to decide which are the implementation implications of these scientific findings. Science is clear, genetic is clear, and it's a long due split that should take place. And as also IUCN has recognized, I think that science, it's very clear, and we hope there will be no manipulation of science. Thank you.
Thank you, Conservation Force. I see IWCMC. You have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. IWMC.
To a large extent, I agree with the speaker, the person avec, pardon, je vais pas.
I'm going to return to my language. First of all, I would like to say that I am very much more in agreement with what was said by my predecessor, but I would like to add something. An intersessional working group was decided on the subject of the listing of higher taxon for nomenclature issues. So would it be a single intersessional working group, or will there be 2 intersessional working groups on nomenclature issues? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, IWMC. Sorry about the misspelling. Okay, now one last WCS.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll be very brief. I think I agree that there's a scientific issue to be discussed, and there is no debate in the scientific community, in IUCN, in the African Elephant Specialist Group, that there are 2 species of African elephants, Loxodonta africana, Loxodonta cyclotis. The issue is, how will CITES deal with that from a nomenclature perspective? Whether CITES will ignore it and leave it all as Loxodonta africana, whether CITES will decide it's 2 species, Africana and Cyclotis, or CITES will implement this as Loxodonta spa to address the valid issue of hybridization brought forward by the delegate from the Democratic Republic of Congo. I think establishment of an intersessional working group to deal with some of the scientific issues is fine. IUCN is present. If they have a comment on the science behind this, as Conservation Force mentioned, I think that would be appropriate, but we do support establishing an intersessional working group. In session is great, and we could have an in-session working group as well, but this is an issue of how does CITES respond to the new science, the clarification that there are 2 species of elephants in Africa, not necessarily how should it be implemented, but how should the appendices reflect that. And we'd be happy to be on any working group. Thank you.
Thank you, WCS. Now I would like to return to the nomenclature specialist for a quick response to the issues raised. Thank you. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. First, with regard to the Democratic Republic of the Congo's observation about hybridization, hybrids are never considered a separate species taxonomically. They are either treated as one parental species or the other. And in the CITES context, hybrids are treated as the highest listed of either of the parental species. With regard to Russia's perspective on the complexity of online databases, this is exactly the point where CITES has decided to focus on time-limited, time-stamped extracts from databases, so that those time-stamped extracts are identical for everybody involved. There is no change. Every country, every party uses the exact same checklist. It may not be in tune with science at the moment, but it is consistent across all parties, which is essential for issuing of permits and trade records. Finally, as regards Israel and others' points about the implications of this, please be aware that this is one decision directed at the Animals Committee to review the science and the taxonomy of African elephants. It is part of a suite of decisions adopted at COP19, also directed to the Secretariat and to the Standing Committee to look at implementation of how such a split may work out. So this topic also will be discussed in Standing Committee, which will, my understanding is there is even a notification foreseen seeking the input of parties to the Standing Committee. So there will be more discussion on this topic. It's quite simply at the Animals Committee, we are just concerned with the science feeding into the Standing Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Nomenclature Specialist, for this clarification. I think that is quite helpful. So how I intend to proceed is to form an in-session working group that looks at all the issues that are raised. And then this in-session working group will provide us, when they come back to the Animals Committee on Thursday or Friday, with a mandate for an intersession working group that will then be struck at that moment. So first they go in session to look at the issues and then come back with a mandate for an intersession working group. Maybe there are certain things that can be covered and finished here, so they would then be left out, and the remaining things will be in the mandate for the intersession working group. And I'm sure African elephants will be intersessionally discussed around the science as explained by the nomenclature specialist. Okay? So I would read out the mandate that we are giving to this in-session working group. The working group shall consider the matters raised in paragraphs 2 to 5 of document AC32, Doc 46, and the report of the Secretariat, and advise about possible ways forward to address the use of online databases as standard nomenclature references. B, consider the scientific merit of CITES recognition of the 2 species of African elephants and, as appropriate, recommend the retention or an appropriate replacement nomenclature standard reference for these animals. C, consider further the implications of adopting the HBWBI illustrated checklist of the birds of the world, and in particular whether the adoption of one of the subsequent annual updates would be desirable, and if so, up until what year. D, provide guidance for the preparation of future checklists based on extracts from online databases. E, consider the draft checklists proposed for the lizard family Iguanida in paragraph 20 and for the genus Phrynosoma in Annex 1. F, review the nomenclatural changes summarized in Annex 2 and Annex 3 for possible adoption at the next meeting of the Conference of the Parties. G, consider the deletion of Ramphastos vitellinus citrullimos from Appendix 2 by reducing the scope of the listing of R. vitellinus in Appendix 2 to Ramphastos vitellinus only. H, develop a terms of reference for an intersessional working group of the elements that the in-session working group could not finalize, and to review possible changes in nomenclature ahead of AC33. And finally, I report back to the Animals Committee at this meeting. So that's the proposed terms of reference. Now I'm asking members of the committee who wants to participate. I will now strike the composition of the working group. Members of the Animals Committee. Africa, of course, the nomenclature specialist, that's quite, we need you there. Observer parties. I see Singapore, Nigeria, no, Namibia, sorry. I have to take the glasses anyway. Russian Federation, DRC, Zimbabwe, South Africa, United States, Tanzania, United Kingdom, China, Cameroon, and the European Union. And Japan, yes. Okay, that's parties. Then observer another one. Senegal, okay. Observer organizations. Conservation Force, UNEP WCMC, Parrots Breeders of Southern Africa, Wildlife Conservation Society, Safari Club International Foundation, IUCN, WWF, Fondation Franz Weber, HSI, IWMC, BirdLife International, Center for Biological Diversity. Okay, with this composition, the working group will do its work. Do we know when?
This afternoon, I think they start.
Wednesday morning.
Wednesday.
Wednesday morning, okay. So with this, we close this item and go on to today's agenda. Agenda item 36 on eels. I would like to ask the Secretariat to present the document.
Thank you, Chair. Document AC32, Doc 36 was prepared by the Secretariat and provides an update on the implementation of decisions 19.219 and 19.220 on eels. As background to these decisions, the Secretariat reported in document COP19, Doc 61, that in order to facilitate the collation of information sought under the decisions on eels, so decisions 18.197 and 198 from parties, and allowed the Secretariat to report to the Animals and Standing Committees, the Secretariat developed a questionnaire to be completed by range states of all Anguillid eels. And this was made available in Annex 2 to notification to the parties number 2021/18 of 8th February 2021. And this is referred to in paragraph I of decision 19.218. This notification is referred to there. The following 27 parties responded to the questionnaire, and these were Algeria, Australia, Canada, excuse me, Croatia, Cuba, Czech Republic, Denmark, Dominican Republic, Estonia, Finland, Greece, Ireland, Japan, Malaysia, Mexico, Morocco, Netherlands, New Zealand, Norway, Slovakia, Republic of Korea, Spain, Sweden, Tunisia, Ukraine, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and the United States of America. So concerning paragraph A of decision 19.219, the Secretariat issued a new notification to the parties in 2023, notification number 62 of 2023, and this was issued on the 18th of May. It invited range states of European eel, transit and importing countries to submit any information that had been sought in the 2021 notification that had not already been provided, or any updates to the information previously submitted, especially information on current levels of or emerging trends in trade in specimens of Anguilla species. By the deadline of 16th of June this year, responses have been received from the following 18 parties: Algeria, Austria, Croatia, Czech Republic, Dominican Republic, Finland, France, Indonesia, Japan, Mexico, Monaco, Morocco, the Netherlands, the Republic of South Korea, Slovakia, Slovenia, Tunisia, and the United States of America. So of these 18 parties, 13 were updates because these parties had already replied to the previous notification, and 5 were new respondents. The notification also invited parties to submit information on the implementation of Decision 19.214 that was not included in the notification, specifically with regards to sharing protocols and guidelines for reintroduction of seized live European eels to the wild. No such information was included in the responses received to date. Concerning paragraph B of Decision 19.220, the Secretariat notes that a considerable number of responses have been received to the notification. There have also been several requests for an extension to the deadline to respond, and that responses have yet to be received from some parties that were specifically mentioned in the notification as being important in the global trade in European eel, in particular China, Egypt and Turkey. As a result, the committee may wish to consider establishing an intersessional working group to consider all the responses to the notification and develop recommendations for consideration at the next meeting. The Secretariat will continue to seek responses, particularly from China, Egypt and Turkey, and will provide all of the information received to this intersessional working group. Another task for the committee to consider at this meeting concerns Annex 2 of this document, where you will find the report entitled Status of Use and Trade in Anguillid Eels, that was previously submitted to the Standing Committee in Annex 4 to document SC74, Doc 64.1. Based on this report and on other available information, the Standing Committee agreed to several recommendations concerning eel at its 74th meeting. Paragraph C of Decision 19.219 also instructs the Secretariat to draft recommendations for more effective future management of harvest and trade for consideration by the Animals Committee. So the Secretariat has extracted some recommendations of a scientific nature coming from the report in the annex, coming from the report that was submitted to the Standing Committee, and this was contained in the annex of this document for consideration by the Animals Committee. These recommendations are listed in paragraph 16 of the present document. The committee is invited to consider these recommendations. And one additional task for the Animals Committee that was overlooked in the document was consideration of the potential use of source code R for ranching for specimens of European eel from aquaculture production systems, and also the potential risks and benefits of reintroducing seized live European eels to the wild. The Animals Committee had agreed to reconsider these issues following COP19, but they were overlooked because they were not included in the text of the decision. But the Secretariat suggests that this task could be added to the mandate of the proposed intersessional working group and considered at AC 33. One second. So in summary, the Animals Committee is invited to A, consider the recommendations in paragraph 16, which is the recommendations from the study, the status of use and trade in Anguillid eels that are of a scientific nature, and to consider establishing an intersessional working group with a mandate to review the summary of the responses to notification to the parties number 2021/18 and notification to the parties 2023/62 on eels, including any updates provided under Decision 19.218 and any recommendations from the Secretariat, and to make draft recommendations on the conservation and management of European eel for consideration by the Animals Committee at its 33rd meeting. And also then to review the potential use of source code R for specimens of European eel from aquaculture production systems and the potential risks and benefits of reintroducing seized live European eels to the wild. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat, for this comprehensive introduction. I would now open the floor for comments from members of the Animals Committee on the recommendations coming out of the document. I see North America. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. The North American region supports the Animals Committee consideration of the recommendations proposed by the Secretariat as outlined in paragraph 16 of this document. Also, we support the establishment of an intersessional working group on eels to review those recommendations and responses to notifications, including updated information with respect to Decision 19.218. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, North America. Any other comments from members? I don't see any, so I open the floor for comments from observer parties. I see China has asked for the floor. China, you have the floor.
Dear Chair, China would like to update the Secretary that China has already submitted the questionnaire last week in support of the Secretary to implement the decision related to European eels. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, China, for this update. I see Canada. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Canada supports the Animals Committee considering the recommendations proposed by the Secretariat as outlined in this document. We also support the establishment of an intersessional working group to review those recommendations and the responses to notifications. Canada has a licensed, regulated, and legal harvest for American eel. Canada has been working on implementing additional management measures through our Domestic Fisheries Act legislation for the American eel fishery. This includes implementing a traceability program within Canada to track American eels from the point of harvest to export. This will be part of a broader review of the management of the fishery within Canada. In addition, the International Council for the Exploration of the Sea, ICES, has formed a scientific working group to discuss the development and implementation of a joint Canada and United States stock assessment for American eel. Canada views this as an important advancement to monitor the conservation status of the species, and we look forward to the outcome of the scientific working group. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Canada. I don't see any other observer party asking for the floor, so I can open the floor for observers. IUCN, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. This intervention is given on behalf of IUCN and ZSL. The interlinkage of international trade and anguillids has been increasingly recognised since the listing of the European eel in Appendix 2. The subsequent suspension of trade from the EU has resulted in demand being met by other European eel range states and anguillid species. With regard to recent changes in trade, an analysis by researchers in Japan expected to be published in the coming months highlights a concerning change in export of anguillid eels. East Asian customs data indicates that imports of juvenile eels to the region increased from approximately 63 tonnes in 2021 to over 176 tonnes in 2022. This near trebling of import was primarily due to a significant increase in reported export of juvenile American eel from Haiti, with around 100 tonnes exported into East Asia in 2022 compared to 10 tonnes in 2021. This reported increase is obviously of great concern in the context of sustainable use and conservation of the species. It's assumed that this reported spike in import of juvenile eels has occurred to meet increased demand from farms in East Asia. And this rise in demand may in turn increase the risk of unsustainable and/or illegal harvest and trade of both listed and non-listed anguillids, and needs to be taken into account in the context of management and enforcement along the supply chain. To compound these matters, there are, as acknowledged, knowledge gaps in key source and destination countries of trade in anguillids that urgently need to be addressed. As such, we would encourage parties that have yet to provide information in response to notification 2023-062 to do so. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, IUCN. Any other observer organization wanting to take the floor? I don't see any, so my conclusion is that the Animals Committee supports the recommendations as outlined in paragraph 16 of the document, and also agrees to form an intersessional working group on eels with the following mandate. Review the summary of the responses to notification to the parties 2021/018 and notification to the parties 2023-062 on eels, including any updates provided under Decision 19 218 and any recommendations from the Secretariat. B, review the potential use of source code R, ranching, for specimens of European eel anguilla from aquaculture production systems and the potential risks and benefits of reintroducing seized live European eels to the wild. And C, make draft recommendations on the conservation and management of a European eel for consideration by the Animals Committee at its 33rd meeting. The working group will be chaired by Europe and Central and South America and the Caribbean. And I'm now seeking membership for this working group. Members? None. Observer parties? New Zealand, Malaysia, Australia, United States, Korea, UK, China, Canada, Portugal. I'm starting to know where the parties are sitting. That's encouraging. Germany, Indonesia, Japan, European Union, Austria, India, and Brazil, yes. Okay. I think that covers parties. Now organizations, server organizations. Certainly IUCN, I suppose. Good. WWF, Zoological Society of London, Global Guardian Trust, Association of Midwestern State Fish and Wildlife Agencies, Species Survival Network, IWMC, there's another one. Yes, Southeast Asian Fisheries Development Center. I think that's it. So this working group is struck, and this closes the agenda item 36 on eels. We now move on to agenda item 29 on West African vultures. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Document AC 32-29 was prepared by the Secretariat and provides information relating to the implementation of decisions 19.192 to 19.196 on West African vultures. With regards to decisions 19.192 and 19.193, the Secretariat issued a notification to the parties to collect information on the implementation of the decisions. The Secretariat received 4 responses from parties. This includes Burkina Faso, Cabo Verde, Ghana, and Guinea. And these are attached as received from the parties as Annex 4 to the present document. A summary of the responses received are contained in Information Document AC32 Inf 8. In terms of enforcement-related aspects, the Secretariat notes that none of the parties that participated in Operation Thunder 2022, a month-long global operation targeting wildlife crime led jointly by Interpol and the World Customs Organization in October 2022, reported any seizures of West African vulture specimens traded illegally at international level. As pointed out in document COP 18, Doc 97 on West African vulture trade and conservation management, the most significant threats facing West African vultures are the mortality caused by intentional poisoning, for the deliberate collection of vultures or their parts for belief-based use, and by poachers deliberately targeting vultures to prevent them from drawing the attention of wardens to illegally killed elephants. Actions aimed at addressing poisoning were also highlighted as important by range states in their responses to the questionnaire. With regards to the production of identification materials focusing on parts and derivatives of vulture species for use by law enforcement officials, the Secretariat has not secured funds to implement this part of the decision 19.194 at this point in time. The decisions also directs the Secretariat to support range states on trade-related aspects of the CMS Multi-Species Action Plan to conserve African Eurasian vultures. Based on the responses received to the questionnaire, poisoning seems to be the key concern and less so trade. CMS shared information with the Secretariat relating to processes underway under its mandate. This included training to improve preparedness and to build capacity to deal with wildlife poisoning incidents and the development of a West African Vulture Conservation Action Plan. The Secretariat provides a summary of direct international trade data covering the period 2000 to 2022 in Annex 3 to the document. It seems the two species most traded over the period is white-backed vulture and griffon vulture. The Secretariat notes that the number of trade transactions seems to have declined over time. The Animals Committee could consider whether a formal analysis is required considering the low numbers of transactions recorded. In terms of paragraph A of decision 19.195, the Animals Committee shall encourage West African range states to undertake a periodic review of the vulture species referred to in decision 19.192, taking note of the offer of the Vulture Specialist Group of the IUCN to assist range states in such an effort. The Animals Committee representatives for Africa could also reach out to the West African vulture range states to engage the IUCN in this regard. The decisions furthermore directs the Animals Committee to consider any request for advice with respect to non-detriment findings for trade in listed West African vulture species. The range states that responded to the questionnaire indicated that they do not allow legal trade in West African vultures and have not done non-detriment findings, therefore. Guinea, however, requested technical and financial support to make non-detriment findings. Guinea is included in the pilot phase of the Compliance Assistance Program, and an action plan has been developed with the national authorities that includes non-detriment findings. The Animals Committee is therefore invited to encourage West African range states to undertake a periodic review of the vulture species referred to in decision 19.192, to consider and respond to requests for advice submitted by parties with respect to the making of non-detriment findings for trade in these species, when received, and to note the information submitted by the Secretariat in accordance with decision 19.194, paragraph E, and make recommendations as appropriate. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat, for this introduction. I now open the floor for comments from members of the Animals Committee. I don't see any, so I would turn to observer parties. No comments there. Observer organizations. No comments there, so as we usually do, silence is agreement. I think we would agree on the recommendations come out from the document as just read out by the Secretariat. So thank you. With this, we move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 11, Joint CITES CMS African Carnivores Initiative. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. As you can see from the document, this aspect is reported on in the compendium that was prepared by the Secretariat. The African Carnivore Initiative Programme of Work was approved by the Standing Committee in 2021 through an intersessional decision-making process. The program of work incorporates existing conservation strategies or comparable guidelines for the 4 species covered by the African Carnivore Initiative, African lion, cheetah, leopard, and wild dog, noting that the wild dog is not included in the CITES appendices. These were all developed under auspices of CITES and/or CMS and resolutions and decisions of the Conference of Parties of the 2 conventions. The compendium AC32Com provides information relating to the preparations for the 2nd meeting of the range states of the joint CITES-CMS African Carnivores Initiative that took place from 1 to 4 May 2023 in Entebbe, Uganda. The Secretariat indicated in the document that an update will be provided during the meeting. In addition to the verbal update provided now, an information document AC32 in 7 has been published that includes further information relating to the meeting, including the outcomes of the agreed by ACI range states during the meeting. The 2nd meeting of the range states of the joint CITES-CMS African Carnivore Initiative was made possible through the generous financial support provided by the European Commission, Switzerland, the federal government of Belgium, and the Flemish government. The Secretariat would like to thank Uganda as well for hosting the meeting and the donors for the support provided. 38 range states for the 4 species covered by the ACI attended the meeting, as well as 19 intergovernmental and non-governmental organizations involved in or supporting activities in range states covered by the ACI. The ACI range states prioritized result areas in the ACI program of work on a sub-regional basis, taking into consideration the conservation importance of the result area. 8 result areas were rated as high conservation importance by all range states. In this regard, the development of a resource kit for lion and leopard based on the resource kit for cheetah, and the development and operationalization, difficult word for me, of an African lion database may be relevant to the mandate of the Animals Committee. The Animals Committee is invited to take note of the information in AC32Com relating to the Joint African Carnivore Initiative and the verbal update provided. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. I'm glad I'm not the only one that stumbles over some complicated words. So I open the floor for comments on the document from the Animals Committee. None. Observer parties? Yes, I'm not there yet. Oh, sorry. Now, observer organizations. I see Conservation Force. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. And the Conservation Force had the privilege and the pleasure to attend the ACI 2 meeting and enjoy the exquisite hospitality of Uganda. I would like to share some brief observation on our attendance to this meeting. First of all, there is a pressing need to give more attention to the needs and programs of the range states, rather than continue to impose on them a series of tasks and burdensome actions. Secondly, it seems to be a clear disconnect between the realities on the ground and the theory behind ACI, whereas the forceful complementarity of CMS on the carnivore scenario should have been based to progress on land use and habitat conservation, which is the priority number 1 for carnivore conservation. Unfortunately, we have not seen that at the meeting, and the implementation of the program of work of Objective 2 is vague on this crucial aspect. At this point of time, Chair, it would be probably important to bring other actors on board. We are therefore suggesting to evaluate the feasibility of bringing FAO and UNESCO on board to advance in actions aimed at land use and habitat conservation. Lastly, Chair, during the meeting, we indicated our intention to evaluate funding of some of the action of SCI and we will be pleased to announce that pledge under another agenda item after discussing some details with the Secretariat. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Conservation Force. I don't see anybody else asking for the floor, so with this, the document, the Animals Committee is noting the document as suggested by the Secretariat in its document. Okay. Okay, with this we move on to agenda item 33 on African lions. Secretariat, you have the floor again.
Thank you, Chair. In document AC 32, Doc 32, the Secretariat provides information relating to the implementation of decisions 19.205 to 19.210 on African lions. With regards to decision 19.205, the Secretariat indicated in the introduction of the previous document that the second meeting of the joint CITES CMS African Carnivore Initiative took place in early May in Entebbe, Uganda, and that the outcomes of the meeting as agreed by the ACI range states were shared in information document AC 32 in 7. The meeting discussed several issues that relate to the decisions on African lion adopted by COP19, including the guidelines for the conservation of lions in Africa. The ACI meeting noted that the comments from the Animals Committee have not been incorporated in the guidelines as yet. It was agreed that the IUCN, in consultation with the range states, will update the guidelines and will prepare in collaboration with the Secretariats a web-based document on the ACI web portal that will be a living document that will be updated as new information becomes available. A review group responsible for the review of proposed amendments to the guidelines before it will be updated online was established. In addition to the guidelines, the ACI2 discussed lion monitoring and agreed on, among others, the sharing of experiences between range states in this regard. The need for an African lion database was also discussed, and as indicated under the previous item, this was identified as a priority by ACI range states. A process was agreed to ensure the involvement of the range states in the further development of the African lion database, and a working group was established to support and guide the process. The Secretariat is developing guidance on the making of non-detriment findings for African lions in collaboration with IUCN and in close consultation with range states, which can be used as a basis to support capacity building in African lion conservation. To initiate the process to develop draft guidance on NDFs for African lion, questions on existing information and processes relating to NDFs for lions were prepared and shared with the ACI range states for inputs. A questionnaire was subsequently published in notification to the parties, and at the time of writing this document, 5 responses were received from parties, including from Central African Republic, Ethiopia, Namibia, Senegal, and Zimbabwe. And since then, we received 3 more responses from Nigeria, South Africa, and Zambia. The information will assist in informing the draft guidance on NDFs for lions to be developed. The draft guidance will be included as a case study in the NDF workshop organized as per Decision 19.132, scheduled to take place in December this year. With regards to the comparative study on African lion population trends, thanks to the contribution by Switzerland, the Secretariat initiated the process to commission the study in the second half of 2023. In terms of Decision 19.210, the Secretariat is directed to report on the implementation of previous Decision 18.246 to the Animals Committee. With regards to the issues covered in the previous decision, the following. The study entitled The Legal and Illegal Trade in Big Cats was completed thanks to the financial support from the Netherlands and the UK. The study was presented at the Big Cat Task Force that took place in April 2023 in Entebbe, Uganda. The outcomes of the Big Cat Task Force are available in information document AC 32 in 9. The outcomes of the CITES Big Cat Task Force include strategies, measures, and activities to improve international collaboration regarding the enforcement of the Convention to address illegal trade in specimens of big cats, and will be considered by the 77th meeting of the Standing Committee. No funding was secured to assess whether the trade in lion specimens reported under Purpose Code H follows the guidance in Resolution Conf 12.3, Rev Cop 19 on permits and certificates. External funding was also not secured to develop guidance materials for the identification of lion and other big cat specimens in trade, or to develop and support the use of appropriate forensic type techniques for identifying lions and other big cat species in trade, as mandated in previous decision 18.246. But through collaboration with the University of Applied Sciences von Hall, Larenstein in the Netherlands, collated guidance materials were added to the CITES Virtual College. The Animals Committee is invited to take note of the present document and the updates by the Secretariat. Note that there are no updates available on the guidelines for the conservation of lions in Africa from ACI 2, and consider the study prepared under Decision 18.246, paragraph A. Consider whether the study requires further review by the Animals Committee, taking into consideration the updates provided by the Secretariat and the fact that the Big Cat Task Force considered the document already. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat, for the presentation of the document. Now I open the floor for comments from members of the Animals Committee on the document. I see Africa. Africa, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. We've just heard that there's been little success in soliciting or accessing funding for many of the activities regarding these carnivores. The reality on the ground is that with the exception of Southern Africa and the rest of the African continent, the large carnivores are really under tremendous pressure. There is a lot of human-wildlife conflict as a result of these large cats. And whereas the range states are desirous of maintaining healthy populations of these large cats, the challenge continues and the numbers continue declining because people, livestock keepers put out poisoned carcasses to kill the predators, and you know, there are all sorts of issues. And there are also other emerging issues like, you know, traditional medicinal practices where people think they can access parts of these carnivores for various purposes, cultural, medicinal purposes, of course on top of the international trade. So it's really important that apart from, you know, funding studies of various types, we try to lobby for funding for actual on-the-ground interventions, particularly in areas where there is a lot of human large predator conflict, to reduce the threats to these large cats. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Africa, for these important statements. No other member asking for the floor, so I open the floor for observer parties. I see Cameroon. Cameroon, you have the floor.
Merci.
Thank you, Chairman, for giving us the floor. I'd like to begin by thanking the organizers of the Entebbe meeting, where Cameroon was an active attendee. As you know, Cameroon is in the range state for most of these big cats, and in particular the lion. So we are very preoccupied by the conservation of these large cats. The threats are several and well known: habitat fragmentation, human fauna conflict, especially during livestock passages. So for Cameroon, this is a very current issue, especially since hunting does occur in our country. So we are extremely interested in the NDF's and Secretariat's guidance to be able to draw up these documents. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cameroon, for this support. I see Zimbabwe. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Maybe just to emphasize on what Secretariat has said on developing the NDFs. We just want to emphasize on the great need for working closely with the range states so that they get the actual realities on the ground as circumstances differ from country to country. And number two, also to expedite the development of these NDFs as they are currently needed in African range states. Based on the meeting that we had in African Union meeting that we had in Addis Ababa, we said there's great need for the development and great agency for the development of these NDFs. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Zimbabwe, for that support as well. So I don't see any other party asking for the floor, so I would open the floor for observer. I see India, sorry. India, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Since India is taking the floor for the first time, India would like to congratulate the Chair and the Vice Chair on your appointments. India also wishes to thank the CITES Secretariat for organizing this in-person meeting of the Animals Committee, and also thank the Government of Switzerland for their hospitality. As mentioned in the outcome document of the CITES Big Cats Task Force meeting held in Entebbe, Uganda, India invites parties to join the International Big Cat Alliance as proposed by India for sharing information, best practices, and ideas which may be of assistance to address illegal trade in big cats and associated issues for big cats conservation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, India. Now I would like to open the floor for observer organizations. I see Born Free. Born Free, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I'm making this intervention on behalf of the following organisations: AEDM Capital Foundation, Animal Welfare Institute, Born Free, Centre for Biological Diversity, Fondation Franz Weber, Humane Society International, Pro-Wildlife and Species Survival Network. We thank the Secretariat for preparing AC 32, Document 32 on African lions, and for the update on the recent meeting of the joint CITES CMS African Carnivores Initiative under the previous agenda item. We thank the Government of Switzerland for providing funding for the study on African lion population trends and conservation and management of African.
Excuse me, Chair, would it be possible to ask the speaker to move his headphone away from the microphone?
Excuse me, Born Free, can you please move away your headphones from the microphone? The interpreters have problems understanding you.
Yes, my apologies to the interpreters. While we note the Secretariat's intention to work with CMS and IUCN on this study, we urge the Secretariat to provide opportunities for wider stakeholders who conduct research and operate African lion conservation and management programs to provide input. We're also pleased to hear that funding has been provided by the United States to enable the Secretariat, working with the IUCN and range states to develop guidance on the making of non-detriment findings for African lions. We understand that this guidance will be developed under the Migratory Species and Shared Population Non-Detriment Findings workstream. We urge the Secretariat and IUCN to ensure the guidance is developed in consultation with importing countries and that it should be adjusted to reflect the outcomes of the second international workshop on non-detriment findings planned in fulfillment of Decision 19.132, which we understand will take place in December in Nairobi. We regret the failure to secure funding to assess whether the trade in lion specimens reported under Purpose Code H follows the guidance in ResConf 12.3, RevCop 19, on permits and certificates in fulfillment of Decision 18.246, paragraph B, and encourage the Animals Committee to recommend that a new draft decision be submitted to COP20 to pursue this work. We also recognise the need for assistance with tackling human-wildlife conflict issues associated with large carnivores, as emphasised by the delegate from Africa, and urge the committee to give this issue due consideration. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Bornfree. I don't see anybody else asking for the floor, so let me quickly think. Okay, so my conclusion is that the Animals Committee notes the document and the updates provided by the Secretariat that includes information shared through information document AC32, Inf. Doc 7 and 9. It notes that a revised guidelines for the conservation of lions in Africa is not available for review by the Animals Committee. Notes that the CITES Big Cat Task Force considered the study entitled The Legal and Illegal Trade in Big Cats during its meeting, and also notes the comments from the regional representative of Africa that more funding should be provided to tackle the issues of human-wildlife conflict on the ground. So that's my conclusions. If the Animals Committee can agree on that, I would like to see some heads nodding or then comments made. Okay, I see a little bit of head nodding. I see more. Okay. So now I have agreement from the Animals Committee on my conclusions. And we would then conclude this item and move on to agenda item 33 on leopards. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Document AC32 Doc 33, prepared by the Secretariat, contains information relevant to the implementation of decisions 19.210, Let me start again. It contains information relevant to the implementation of decisions 19.211 and 19.212 on leopards in Africa adopted at COP19. At its 31st meeting, the Animals Committee discussed the roadmap for the conservation of leopard, and the comments made by the Animals Committee on the roadmap were shared with the leopard range states for consideration at the second range states meeting of the ACI that took place in May 2023 in Entebbe, Uganda. As indicated in the document, the Secretariat will provide a verbal update on the outcomes of ACI2. The Secretariat made the outcomes of the ACI meeting available in information document AC32 INF7, as mentioned before. The ACI range states discussed the roadmap for the conservation of the leopard and agreed that the IUCN will update the roadmap and finalize it in consultation with the range states. Furthermore, range states will focus on the development of regional conservation strategies for leopard using the roadmap as strategic guidance. The Animals Committee is invited to take note of this document and the update provided by the Secretariat relating to the discussions on this matter at ACI2 and make recommendations to the Standing Committee as appropriate. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. I open the floor for comments from the members. I see North America. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The North American region strongly supports the collaborative efforts made thus far towards African leopard conservation and is appreciative of expertise contributed by the leopard range states at ACI2 meeting in May. Given the impact of this document on leopard conservation and trade, the North American region recommends delaying the review of the leopard roadmap and making recommendations until AC33. This would provide time needed to review, respond, and offer revisions to the document. At present, the North American region is concerned that suggesting changes to the roadmap based on oral updates provided by the Secretariat in real-time limits the CITES decision-making process at this meeting and may hinder conservation efforts for the species. We welcome the Animals Committee and parties' views on this suggestion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, maybe there's a bit of misunderstanding here, because the way I understand it is that the roadmap is in the process of being reviewed, including the range states. So it is done with and between the range states. And at the moment we don't have a deadline when that review will be finished, but we could suggest that as soon as the review, including the range states, is concluded, that it is then submitted to the Animals Committee for its review. Whenever it is finished, yeah. Because at the moment there is no updated version. It's the old version, and it is now being updated and reviewed, including the range states. And I think it would be good to have that the Animals Committee says whenever it is finished, then we want to see it.
So the idea is to leave time, so it's still open. So we want to be sure that this is still open to receive more feedback, and then to have an update version for revision next meeting on the Animals Committee.
Well, the problem is we don't have a deadline yet when it will be when the update that is currently ongoing will be finished. So we don't know if it will be AC33 or then AC34 in 26. So it's not clear at what time, but I think it would be important that the Animals Committee requests that it is being shown to the Animals Committee and reviewed.
Thank you, Chair. So as long as still open to feedback to be received by range countries is very important. Thank you.
Yes. That is secured, that, yeah. So I don't see anybody from the Animals Committee asking for the floor, so I open the floor for observer parties. Then observer organizations. HSI, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I'm making this intervention on behalf of Humane Society International, Born Free Foundation, Center for Biological Diversity, Species Survival Network, Animal Welfare Institute, and Pro-Wildlife. We thank the Secretariat for preparing AC 32 Document 33, Leopards in Africa, and again for the update on this recent meeting of the joint CITES CMS African Carnivores Initiative. We also thank the CITES and CMS Secretariats in Uganda, the European Commission, Switzerland, Belgium, and the Flemish government for making the ACI meeting and its important work possible. In relation to AC 32, Document 33, we recommend removal of the language in sections 2.5 and 3 of the roadmap portraying trophy hunting as a potential benefit to the species, an acknowledgement that populations have severely declined under current management regimes. It is important that the Animals Committee takes into consideration the dire need for transparent, robust population studies in many countries. The one instance where a leopard population was surveyed, it revealed disturbing declines, and 2 recent scientific studies submitted to AC 31 further document the risks of trophy hunting to leopards and the failure of the current CITES quota system to meet the general principles of precaution, sustainable use, and adaptive management. It is also critical that the roadmap is updated to acknowledge decisions adopted at COP19 and to note that some countries with quotas have not developed management plans, quotas for Kenya and Malawi have been removed, and the continued need for non-detriment finding guidance for leopard trophies as required under Decision 18.169 as revised at COP19. We remain concerned that CITES quotas for leopards continue to be in place despite their basis in faulty modeling, the missing NDF guidance, lack of management plans for certain countries, and lack of updated, reliable population data, a concern acknowledged at the African Carnivore Initiative meeting earlier this year. We consequently urge the committee to recommend that all leopard hunting trophy quotas be suspended until this guidance has been developed, reviewed, and approved by the convention. In lieu of a blanket suspension, we urge the committee to note the current unfavorable conservation status of many leopard populations and recommend review of hunting quotas suspension where uncertainty exists in relation to population status or management and validity of NDFs, and reductions where parties issue far fewer annual licenses than their export quotas allow. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, HSI. I see WWF. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. And as this is our first intervention, we join others in congratulating you and Hugh on your re-election. Like many others, I've spent the last day reflecting with some sadness on the loss of Dr. Thomas Althouse, who I considered a personal friend. I'll just be brief and say that we share the concerns of the last speaker, and our suggestion would be that the leopard quotas should be reviewed in every alternate intersessional period. That would be every 6 years by the Animals Committee. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, WWF. I think this is something that we will probably hear from the next COP, that we should review these quotas, but at the moment I don't think I see very much support among parties for changing that process. So for me, I think to conclude, I would suggest that the Animals Committee notes the document and the updates provided by the Secretariat that includes information shared through information documents AC32 Inf Doc 7, notes that a revised roadmap for the conservation of leopards is not available for review by AC32, and invites the Secretariat to submit the revised roadmap to the Animals Committee for review when available. So that's my conclusion. I see nodding. Very good. So that's the way we go. And we now move to agenda item 35 on Saiga antelope. And here again, it's the Secretariat who introduces the document. So Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Document AC32, Doc 35, was prepared by the Secretariat. At its 19th meeting, the Conference of the Parties adopted decisions 19.213 to 19.217 on Saiga antelopes or Saiga SPP. With regard to decisions 19.214, the fourth meeting of the signatories of the Memorandum of Understanding concerning conservation, restoration, and sustainable use of the Saiga antelopes, or MOS4, was held in the Russian Federation in September 2021 with the support of the CMS Secretariat. The main scientific information reported to MOS4 regarding Saiga is presented in the document, which includes the latest population estimates of Saiga as of 2021, the conservation achievements, conservation challenges, and threats. Saiga tatarica populations have shown consistent increases in its population between 2015 and 2021. Noteworthy is the population of Kazakhstan, which was increased tenfold since 2015. In addition, the Secretariat provides a brief update on information in the CITES trade database since its last reporting of it at the 74th meeting of the Standing Committee. With regards to Decision 19.214, paragraph B, the Secretariat received a request of support by the government of Kazakhstan with regard to issues of stockpile and human-wildlife conflict, given the recent increase in Saiga populations in the country. The successful conservation and management measures taken by the government of Kazakhstan has led to substantial increases in the Saiga population and has recorded over 1.2 million Saiga in 2021 and over 1.9 million in 2022. The Secretariat attended a virtual and in-person meeting hosted by the government of Kazakhstan with the support of the CMS Secretariat to provide information on the implementation of Saiga in relation to Saiga, implementation of CITES in relation to Saiga, and effective stockpile management and monitoring. In accordance with Decision 19.214, the Secretariat will continue to provide assistance in ensuring effective stockpile management and monitoring of Saiga antelopes. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. Now I open the floor for comments from members on Saiga. I don't see anybody asking for the floor, so I move to observer parties. I see the Russian Federation, followed by the United States.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We would like to thank the Secretariat for the work done and for the information provided. On our end, we would like to make some suggestions and comments to the document that was published. They are more aimed at providing certain additional details. For paragraph 11b, we can agree that linear infrastructure has a negative impact on Saiga tatarica populations. At the same time, we note, and we would like to provide this information for the reference of the whole, that it helps with solving the problems of disease transmission and conflicts with farmers. It's in our opinion. For paragraph 11d, we consider it possible to add that illegal trade is carried out most often through transit non-range states, where restrictive measures have not been established. For paragraph 10e, we would like to know that mass die-offs of Saigas has never been recorded in the Russian Federation. Veterinary studies are currently being conducted. For paragraph 11F, dissatisfaction, so to say, with Saiga antelopes on the part of local livestock herders due to growing competition for pastures and water and suspicions of transmissions of disease to livestock is seen as a challenge in the Russian Federation. We suppose that this problem specifically requires additional attention. Solutions to reduce conflicts have not yet been found, and we shall continue work in this direction. For paragraph 17, we would like to note that the Russian Federation considers it appropriate to further clarify the data provided in paragraph in this paragraph of document AC32, Doc 35. Since 2016, the Russian Federation has issued one certificate for the export of one Saiga, one skin, two horns, one skull from the animal bred in captivity, and this certificate was issued for export to the United States for educational purposes. So that means that in the absence of information about origin, we consider it appropriate to exclude this information. The Russian Federation is currently working on the measures laid down in the medium-term international program of work for Saiga antelope until 2025. In particular, this work includes the fact that Saiga was listed in federal and local red books. The turnover of Saiga products entails criminal liability. National strategy and the roadmap for conservation of Saiga were approved. One bilateral intergovernmental agreement was concluded. It was with Kazakhstan. In Kalmykia, there were no cases since 2019 of poaching recorded, and we consider it not to be just a lack of information, but the result of coordinated work against poaching. We are also working on methodology of counting for Saiga used UAVs, using drones, and development of methods of scientific genetic identification of Saiga antlers for the purposes of definition of their places of origin. We would also like to mention that currently Saiga conservation works are funded in the Russian Federation at the federal level, and also with the inclusion of donors from the private sector. We think that this work can be done in such way and shall be done in such way. And as the work on the conservation of Saiga is extremely important for us, and we consider it necessary to note that its continuation shall go along with attracting additional external funding to support this conservation. And we would also seek the assistance of our CITES partners in this matter. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When we are ready to provide our comments in a written form to the Secretariat in case necessary.
Thank you, Russian Federation. That's exactly what I would have asked you to do. So thank you very much. Now I turn to the United States. United States, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The United States appreciates the Secretariat's continued attention to these species and regular reports to CITES meetings, and we support taking note of the document. We are also pleased to hear that the government of Kazakhstan has requested support from the Secretariat with regard to management and monitoring of its stockpiles and human-wildlife conflict, and we look forward to hearing any update on those discussions. In document AC 32, Doc 35, paragraph 12, the Secretariat has included a statement that lacks some important nuance necessary to reflect a complete understanding of the limited circumstances when previously imported Saiga specimens may be authorized for lawful re-export in order to ensure that effective enforcement of the zero export quota for commercial purposes for Saiga. The statement is, at COP 18, it was agreed to amend the listing of both species in Appendix 2 by adding the following annotation: a zero export quota for wild specimens traded for commercial purposes. The annotation applies to exports of Saiga specimens of wild origin for commercial purposes, taking place under the provisions of Article 4, paragraphs 2 and 3 of the Convention. It does not apply to re-exports of specimens of Saiga spa under the provisions of Article 4, paragraphs 4 and 5, which can continue for commercial or non-commercial purposes. As we have previously noted, without evidence of lawful prior CITES trade in the Saiga specimen, the re-export would not be lawful under Article 4, paragraph 5A of the Convention. The range states stopped commercial exports of specimens of Saiga antelope in 2005, so the only legal international trade in Saiga specimens would be re-exports from stockpiles imported under valid CITES permits prior to 2005. Accordingly, any re-exports of Saiga specimens from any lawful stockpiles require evidence of lawful CITES trade in the specimen prior to the end of commercial exports by range states in 2005. With regard to Saiga stockpiles, we look forward to hearing any updates regarding these issues and urge re-exporting parties to provide information on the status, management, and monitoring of their Saiga horn stockpiles and requesting assistance from the Secretariat. Finally, we are pleased to share that the United States continues to provide grant funding for on-the-ground conservation to address poaching and trafficking of Saiga antelopes across the entire trade chain. And we'd be happy to provide additional information about those projects we've supported for those interested. And then one final note with regard to the document is a question with regard to the table in paragraph 15. There is a record indicated in that table where the purpose of transaction code is noted as M for medicinal. And we would note that the Conference of the Parties has agreed that purpose code M should be used where the transaction is for the purpose of medical or veterinary testing, diagnosis, treatment, or research, including biomedical research. And so we would ask the Secretariat to please follow up with regard to that record and confirm that the purpose of transaction code has been used correctly. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, United States. We will come back to all of this, I suppose. I see no other party asking for the floor, so I open the floor for observer organizations. I see the WCS. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to the Secretariat for the document and to the Animals Committee members for continued attention to issues around Saiga. And we also appreciate the intervention of the United States on multiple issues, including in particular the issue of re-export, with which we strongly concur. Hope the Secretariat will address the issue, but perhaps it should be looked at by the Standing Committee as well. We note with concern the information in the document in paragraph 18 which the US alluded to in the table, that indicates that 600 kilograms of Saiga horns of unknown source were exported in 2021 with Purpose Code M. And it is, as the US has stated, unlikely that that was for biomedical research or veterinary testing or diagnosis. And we suggest that perhaps the issue of the use of source code M should be, Purpose Code M should be brought to the attention of the Standing Committee. And we also strongly concur with the recommendation that the issue of stockpile management should be discussed further, and I believe it will, but we'd like to reinforce that, by the Standing Committee. Re-exports should not be allowed from any specimens that were imported unless they were imported prior to 2005. So we encourage greater scrutiny on the issue of stockpile management and reporting. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, WCS. Okay, that concludes, and I will now have to consult with the Secretariat. Just a second. Okay, so my conclusion is that just a short response to the Russian Federation. Your statements, your comments will be included in the summary record. We cannot change the document as it is now, but your comments and suggested changes will be reflected in the summary record based on the document that you will provide to the Secretariat. Okay, so my conclusion is the Animals Committee takes note of the document and instructs the Secretariat to convey the concerns raised by the United States on the re-export issue and the use of Purpose Code M to the Standing Committee. So that would be my conclusion. Okay, I don't see any opposition, so we move forward this way. Thank you very much. So the next agenda item is agenda item 38 on the seahorses. I intend to take the two documents together, one after the other, and then hear comments from the floor on both documents. So Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Document AC32, Doc 38.1, was prepared by the Secretariat and provides a brief update on progress made concerning the implementation of the decisions on seahorses that were adopted at the 19th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. At COP19, the Secretariat pointed out in its comments on the Standing Committee's document on seahorses that the annexes in document SC74, Doc 70.1, were intended to form the basis of the expert expert workshop called for in decision 18.229, paragraph C, subparagraph Roman numeral 2. But that the workshop itself would not take place until after COP19. And the objective of the proposed workshop was to discuss the implementation and enforcement of CITES for trade in hippocampus species, including the recommendations and outcomes from the review of significant trade process, and propose practical steps to address implementation and enforcement challenges. Furthermore, the Secretariat highlighted in its comments on document COP19 Doc 69.2 on next steps towards the successful implementation of the Appendix 2 listing for seahorses, which was submitted by 9 parties, that this document conflicted somewhat with document COP19 Doc 69.1, which was the report submitted by the Standing Committee, as it appeared to preempt the outcome of the workshop, this expert workshop that had not yet taken place, before the Animals Committee had an opportunity to review the results of the workshop. So at COP19, the Conference of the Parties adopted a set of decisions that was merged from the draft decisions in both documents, COP19 Doc 69.1 and 69.2. And for the reasons just outlined, these decisions are already based on some of the recommendations in the study that is now referred to in decision 18.229, paragraph C, subparagraph Roman numeral I, which formed the basis of the document COP19 Doc 69.2. However, the Animals Committee may wish to undertake its own review of these recommendations. So the recommendations from the summary report, changes in the international trade in live seahorses, Hippocampus SPP, after their listing on CITES Appendix 1, these are presented in Annex 1 to this document. And the recommendations from the report, implementation of CITES Appendix 2 listing for seahorses in the context of export bans and suspensions, are presented in Annex 2 to this document. However, I should note it has come to our attention that a number of recommendations that should have been included in Annex 2 were overlooked, and these will be included in a rev version of the document to be published shortly. The Animals Committee is also invited by the Conference of the Parties to review any other relevant information available on seahorses, and the Secretariat notes that document AC 32, Doc 38.2, which has been submitted by the Philippines and the United States of America at this meeting, contains the results of an Asian regional workshop on seahorses that the Animals Committee may also wish to consider in order to develop recommendations to ensure sustainable and legal international trade in seahorses in the context of paragraph B of decision 19.231. And concerning paragraph C of this decision, the Secretariat would also like to draw the Committee's attention to document PC 26 Doc 17, AC 32 Doc 16 on non-detriment findings, in particular Annex 3 of that document, which contains the working group's terms of reference. And you will note that the terms of reference for Group 5 on NDFs for marine and aquatic species include seahorses as a possible case study to be considered at the second International Expert Workshop on non-detriment findings to be held later this year. So in conclusion, the Animals Committee is invited to note the information in this document and to consider establishing an intersessional working group with a mandate to review available information on trade in seahorses, including the recommendations contained in Annex 1 and 2 to this document, which will be revised, so the revised version of this document, taking into consideration the issues raised in paragraphs 8 and 9 above, and the recommendations of the expert workshop contained in document AC 32, Doc 38.2, and to produce a consolidated set of recommendations for consideration by the Animals Committee at its 33rd meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. As mentioned, I would like to give the floor now to either the United States or the Philippines on document AC 32 at 38.2. This is the United States. United States, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to introduce document 38.2, which provides background and a report of a recent workshop focused on the implementation of CITES for seahorses. As outlined in the document, the workshop was held in the Philippines in March of this year with attendance of government officials from CITES and fisheries authorities and experts from many countries in Asia. We wish to extend our gratitude to the government of the Philippines for hosting the workshop and thank Project Seahorse for its work to organize and support the meeting. The workshop provided an opportunity for CITES parties to discuss guidance for the making of non-detriment findings, monitoring seahorse populations, making legal acquisition findings, and enforcing compliance with CITES. Participants were actively engaged in the workshop and based on discussions at the meeting, developed a suite of recommendations for the Animals Committee, Standing Committee, and the Secretariat. The United States believes the outcomes of the workshop provide useful information for the Animals Committee to consider in its development of proposed recommendations in fulfillment of decisions adopted at COP19, aimed at ensuring the sustainability and legality of the international trade in seahorses. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. That's exactly what we will be proposing to do. So I open the floor for comments from the Animals Committee. I see the North American region. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm referring to document 38.1, where the North American region would like to thank the Secretary for providing this document. And also the region supports the Animals Committee taking note of this document, and also supports the Animals Committee establishing an intersectional working group with a mandate to review the available information on trade, consider the recommendations contained in this document and the results of the workshop contained in document 38.2, and present a consolidated set of recommendations for consideration to AC 33. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, North America. Central and South America and the Caribbean, you have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. On document 38.1 on seahorses, hippocampus species, we thank the Secretariat for the preparation of the document. The region for Central South America and the Caribbean agrees with the idea to set up an intersessional working group to look at this and to draw up recommendations for AC 33. We would like to commend the work that's being carried out by some countries in the region, such as Peru, on inventories for the species. On document 38.2, we'd like to thank the organizers of the workshop, and we take note of the document. Thank you.
Thank you, Central and South America and the Caribbean. And now open the floor for observer parties. I see China. China, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. China shared the concern of the depletion of wild seahorse population due to illegal trade. We agree that effective fishery management are crucial for the sustainable use and conservation of seahorse. China appreciates the effort of the supporting parties, the Philippines and the United States of America, for the support, and in particular, we applaud Project Seahorse for their effort in devising management guidelines and organizing workshops to foster constructive discussion among ring state and also key stakeholders to move toward the sustainable management of seahorse population. China will continue our resolute enforcement effort against the illegal trade to protect seahorses. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, China. Then I have India. India, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. It is important to underscore here that seahorses, cygnethids, are listed in the Schedule 1 of Wildlife Protection Act 1972 of India, thereby according them the highest degree of protection in the country. The hunting, trade, both national and international, of seahorses is prohibited. During the 19th COP at Panama, India had raised concerns regarding implementation report produced by Project Seahorse, especially in respect of India, the process by which it has been produced at SC74. Subsequent to SC74, we had requested clarity from the Secretariat as to whether the Project Seahorse had been commissioned by the Secretariat to conduct the study referred to Decision 18.229 C1. We did not receive a response. Chair, the main subject matter of the Project Seahorses report with respect to India's concerns, illegal harvesting and trade of seahorses in India, and enforcement of India's national laws. The report contains a recommendation that India remove its stricter domestic measures for seahorses. We would like to reiterate that the adoption and retention of such a measure is a sovereign right accorded to parties by Para 1 of Article 14 of the Convention. Chair, we believe that there has been a misrepresentation of facts concerning India and recommendations being made without the views of CITES MA India or the Ministry of Environment, Forest, Climate and Government of India, which governs listing of wild animals in schedules of Wildlife Protection Act. And therefore, India would like to be a part of any intersessional working group that may be formed in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you, India. I would now give the floor to Indonesia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Seeing it is the first time for Indonesia taking the floor, we congratulate you on the re-election and appreciate Switzerland for hosting this meeting. Firstly, Indonesia would like to congratulate the success of the workshop held in the Philippines this year. We highly appreciated the term of the output have been received from the workshop. Not only recommendation given, but also very important lesson learned from all the parties. Indonesia support the recommendation emerging from the workshop. As similar to another parties, we have issues in providing NDF, strengthening the work of our authorities in legal acquisition finding, LAF, and also monitoring the trade of seahorses due to limited of human resources and funds. However, we have confidence that we can face these challenges with the support from the convention. Indonesia government also endorsed program for a better seahorses management to ensure that seahorses being traded sustainably. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Indonesia. I don't see anybody else asking for the floor from parties, so I open the floor for observer organizations. I see Zoological Society of London. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. ZSL is coordinating the input to the Aquatic Species Non-Detriment Finding Working Group as part of the process that will be discussed under agenda item 16 and was mentioned in the introduction to the present agenda item. The report of the regional workshop in document 38.2 has provided an excellent case study for addressing capacity needs in relation to producing NDFs, and we would encourage parties to consider replicating it for other species, both aquatic and terrestrial. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Zoological Society of London. Now I have to read it again. Sorry, your placard. Southeast Asian Fisheries Development Center, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Regarding the outputs from the workshop conducted by the Seahorse Project in the Philippines in March, SAFDEC, Southeast Asian Fisheries Development Center, committed to continue our collaboration with international and regional partners in promoting the implementation of the provisions of the CITES listed aquatic species of seahorse in our member countries, including all ASEAN member states. SAFDEC also would further work in collaboration with our member countries by promoting the use of the new approach, easier NDF development document. By SAFDEC can explore further how to assist our member countries to develop their NDF for seahorses. by using this NDF development document and others. CFDEC also are committed to work closely with our member countries to promote the use of 5Q as presented in the workshop in the Philippines for easier NDF development and making it more accessible and practical for member countries. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for your intervention. Any other organization asking for the floor? So I will quickly consult with the Secretariat. Just a second. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to consult with the Secretariat concerning the intervention from India, and the Secretariat will liaise bilaterally with India on the issues that you raised in relation to your intervention. Is that okay? Okay, very good. So for the remaining parts, I think the Animals Committee can note this document and will establish an intersessional working group with the following mandate. Review available information on trade in seahorses, including the recommendations contained in Annex 1 and 2 to document AC32, Doc 38 as revised, taking into consideration the issues raised in paragraphs 8 and 9 of that document and the recommendations of the expert workshop contained in document AC32, Doc 38.2, and produce a consolidated set of recommendations for consideration by the Animals Committee at its 33rd meeting. As per our document on leads of the issue, chair of this working group will be Central and South America and the Caribbean, Daniel Ramadori. And now I'm asking members of the Animals Committee whether they want to be part of this working group. Yes. You will, obviously, you will have to be, as you will be chairing it. Very good, thank you. Central, South America and Caribbean. I would then open the floor for expressions of interests for, okay, I see Asia is also going to be part of the working group. Thank you very much. Observer parties who wish to be part of that intersession working group. I see Malaysia, Mexico, Argentina, Australia, India, Indonesia, Brazil, European Union, United States, UK, China, Peru. I would have come over. It's okay. Portugal and Africa also from the members. And Senegal, sorry, yeah. And Canada. That is, I think, all parties. Then I would then open the floor for observer organizations. I see WWF, IUCN, Southeast Asian Fisheries Development Center, Zoological Society of London, Pet Advocacy Network, Association of Zoos and Aquariums, Traffic, Center of Biological Diversity. And over here we have FAO, Ornamental Fish International. Okay, this working group is then struck, and we can move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 43 on annotations. Who's going to present that? So it will be the UK who will be introducing the document, I've been told. So UK, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. At the 19th meeting of the Conference of Parties in Panama, parties adopted Decision 16.162 RevCop 19, which directs the Standing Committee to re-establish the Working Group on Annotations and, in close collaboration with the Animals and Plants Committees, to continue reviewing the appropriateness and practical challenges resulting from the implementation of the annotations to the appendices. At its 76th meeting, the Standing Committee re-established the Working Group. The terms of reference for that Working Group are as outlined in Decision 16.162 RevCop 19, are set out in paragraph 2 of the document, and the membership of the Intersessional Working Group is set out in paragraph 3. The document, as presented here, was discussed at the 26th meeting of the Plants Committee, where they agreed to nominate the Plants Committee representatives for North America and the alternate representative for Europe to participate in the Standing Committee's Intersessional Working Group on Annotations. The committee noted the tasks included in the Standing Committee Intersessional Working Group terms of reference as presented in paragraphs 2 of the document, and in particular paragraphs A and C, and invited the working group to consider as a priority completion of its tasks under paragraphs A and C of its mandate, with a particular focus on the review of annotations, Annotation 14. The Animals Committee is now invited to agree on which of its members will participate in the Standing Committee's Intersessional Working Group and suggest any additional work related to annotations that could be directed to that working group. Following this meeting, our colleagues that will be chairing the Intersessional Working Group will be in communication with members of that group to initiate their work. In the meantime, I look forward to receiving comments from the committee and observers. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, UK, for introducing the document. I now open the floor for comments from the committee. I see North America. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The North American region support increased involvement on the Plants and Animals Committee in the Standing Committee Intersessional Annotations Working Group. The North American region has not prioritized any annotations related to CITES list animal species that require consideration during the current intersessional period. But if other committee members or parties identify any such annotations, we believe that the Standing Committee Intersessional Working Group should be requested to discuss those issues separately from the planned annotation work. Finally, the North American region wishes to congratulate the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland for assuming the chair of the Standing Committee Intersessional Working Group on Annotations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, North America. Any other member wishing to take the floor? I don't see anybody, so I open the floor for comments from observer parties. I see Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, since this is a working group on annotations, there is an annotation which we think must be added to the working group, to this group. It is an annotation, precisely annotation number 2, pertaining to the listing of elephant populations of Botswana, Namibia, South Africa, and Zimbabwe, which apparently are populations included in appendix number 2. This annotation, this particular annotation, has time-bound elements and recommendations which have since been implemented or have taken place. For example, the annotation recommends a once-off ivory sale, which took place years back, but this is still part of the annotation. Therefore, it is obsolete. We suggest that this annotation be added to the work of this working group for further review. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Zimbabwe, for this suggestion. Don't see any other party asking for the floor. I open the floor for observer organizations. I don't see any, so I will just consult quickly. Okay. So based on our tasks attributed to the members of the Animals Committee as leads, we have Africa, who is has lead on annotations, and Europe, and we will nominate those people that will be available to liaise with the UK on that matter. As a representation, then we have a suggestion by Zimbabwe to include annotation 2 on the listing of African elephants in Annex 2 to the work of this working group, and I would seek the confirmation of the members of the committee if they would agree to add this task to the working group. I see nodding, so yes, Africa as well. So I think this is an issue that we will then convey to the task of this working group. Okay, that concludes agenda item 43 on annotations, and I would then move on to agenda item 44, informal review mechanism for existing and proposed annotations, and I give the floor to the Secretariat.
Thank you, Chair. This agenda item will be introduced by my new colleague, Thomas Deloyle, who I'm thrilled to welcome to the CITES community after being announced by our Secretary General in her opening remarks. And Mr. Chair, thanks to your excellent chairmanship, Swiss management of time, allow me to take 1 minute to explain that Perhaps you may have noticed, or perhaps not, that several members of the legal team that you saw in action in Panama and Lyon are not longer with the CITES Secretariat. I would like to say that I only have words of gratitude and admiration for Elodie Moulin, Rachel Gogan, Elke Hellings, Johannes Stahl, and I wish also all the success to my fellow lawyer Sophie Flensborg in her new task. And yeah, I'm very happy to have Thomas with us because the last 6 months I've been alone dealing with a lot of legal issues. So Thomas, good luck and over to you.
Thank you so much, Juan Carlos, and thank you, Chair. The Secretariat refers to document AC32-Doc44, entitled Informal Review Mechanism for Existing and Proposed Annotations. Pursuant to decisions 19.266 and 19.267, the Secretariat has been requested to develop a proposal on the feasibility and requirements for an informal review mechanism for existing and proposed annotations. The Secretariat estimates the cost of preparing such a proposal at $30,000 US. The Secretariat wishes to thank Switzerland for pledging the sum necessary for the implementation of Decision 19.266. The Secretariat is currently preparing terms of reference for the development of the proposal mentioned above. The aim of such a mechanism would be to ensure consistency in the annotations and to harmonize their interpretation and implementation. The Secretariat will submit a report to the 77th meeting of the Standing Committee and invites the Animals Committee to designate focal points for the consultation with the Standing Committee on the outcomes of the proposal. The Animals Committee is invited to take note of the Secretariat's progress in the implementation of decisions 19.266 and 19.267. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat, and good start. So I open the floor for comments from the members on this document. Okay, I open the floor for comments from observer parties. Observer organizations. Okay, so the Animals Committee takes note of the progress in the implementation of Decision 19.266 and 19.267. Thank you. As we are ahead of time, which is to me a positive surprise, I would like to take the opportunity to continue our work. I would ask the members of the committee if they are in opposition that we start with some items of that we thought would come on Thursday morning. See if you are ready to continue or if you would prefer to go for an early lunch. Okay. I give you a couple of minutes to reflect on that and we'll come back in just a couple of minutes. Okay, have you reflected on it? So are you ready to continue? Okay. Yes, Europe?
Thank you very much, Chair. I think we can continue with those documents where we are going to listen to reports of the Secretariat, like maybe Agenda Item 19. We, of course, cannot go to those where we await outcomes of the working groups or where maybe the regions still need to coordinate, where a more in-depth discussion is envisaged. Thank you.
Thank you, Europe. Certainly, we will do to that. We will not preempt work that has still to be done. Wouldn't be very wise, I think. I see Brazil. Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor, Mr. Chair. And my question is, are we having working groups now during lunchtime? Because if we are, then maybe a quick stop to actually have lunch before the working groups would be ideal. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't think we have working groups over lunch, so there will be enough time to get food to be ready for the afternoon. Okay, so with this, I would open the document 13 on country-wide review of significant trade. I will introduce that document myself, so I shot myself in the foot, but that's my problem. So I'm introducing document PC Doc 14, AC 32, Doc 13 on behalf of the chairs of the Animals and Plants Committees. The document notes that at its 18th meeting, the Conference of the Parties adopted decisions on country-wide significant trade reviews to determine if such reviews may be a way to address systemic problems in making NDFs at the national level, related more to institutional or other wider challenges other than species-specific issues. This would draw upon the lessons learned, outcomes and the impacts of the country-wide review of significant trade of Madagascar. Subsequently, at the 74th meeting of the Standing Committee, the Secretariat presented a review of existing CITES mechanisms and program activities, including the CAP Compliance Assistance Program and the ongoing work on capacity building, outlining how these mechanisms could provide targeted support to parties identified as requiring assistance in relation to the review of significant trade at the national level. The Secretariat had indicated at SC 74 that it had concluded that the scientific and management issues identified in the country-wide significant trade review for Madagascar can be integrated into other existing mechanisms or program activities, in particular the CAP. However, the Standing Committee agreed with the Animals and Plants Committees that it was premature to conclude on the need to develop a new mechanism to provide targeted support to parties at the national level based on the scientific and management issues identified in the country-wide review for Madagascar. The Animals and Plants Committees therefore proposed new decisions that were adopted at COP19. Noting that at COP19, the parties also adopted new decisions and a new resolution on capacity building, as well as decisions on the Compliance Assistance Program and revised resolution CON 14 on CITES compliance procedures. These decisions and resolutions could be relevant to the implementation of Decision 1947 and should be considered in that context. To implement the COP19 decisions, the Animals and Plants Committees are invited to consider establishing a joint intersession working group, and proposed terms of reference are presented in paragraph 9 of the document. The Plants Committee at its 26th meeting agreed to the establishment of a joint intersession working group with a slightly amended terms of reference to those presented in paragraph 9. The only change to the terms of reference was the insertion of develop a new resolution before or other existing resolutions in paragraph B, so that the text would read now, B, consider whether scientific and management issues identified in the country-wide review of significant trade for Madagascar and outlined in document AC 30, Doc 12.3, PC 24, Doc 13.2, 17.3 are sufficiently addressed through existing management, existing mechanisms, or if appropriate, propose amendments to Resolution Conf 12.8, Ref Cop 18, develop a new resolution or other existing resolutions, or propose a new mechanism to undertake such reviews. So now I would open the floor for comments from members of the Animals Committee on this matter. Yes, Oceania, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I thank the chairs of the scientific committees for putting this paper together. I think it's very useful, and I feel that from what I've read is that the countrywide review of Madagascar was a very useful exercise. It may have been a fairly time-consuming one for the Secretariat, unfortunately, but I think from Madagascar's point of view, it probably was. It appears to have been beneficial, and I see scope for similar assistance in the Oceania region where some parties are struggling with CITES implementation. So I agree with the striking of an intersessional working group, but because this countrywide review sort of covers compliance issues as well, I wonder whether there can be some sort of formal representation from the Standing Committee, for example, from the chair of the Standing Committee, who's in the room here today, to join in that capacity rather than in capacity of a country, just to make sure that there's sort of integration between animals, plants and standing committees on this countrywide review process. Thank you.
Thank you, Oceania, and for raising that issue and for the support. I open the floor for further comments from members. I don't see any, so I open the floor for comments from observer parties. I don't see any. Observer organizations. I see HSI. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would note that the significant trade review for Madagascar was started in 2000. That means 23 years later, we have completed precisely one significant country review, significant trade review for a whole country. And however useful the results from that may have been, it suggests that this is not exactly a process that is likely to produce rapid and streamlined results. I would therefore suggest that certainly one of the things the working group should be considering is how any deliverables from any further reviews that might be done in other countries could be produced more rapidly, perhaps without going into as broad a range of issues, because otherwise it may be another 20 years before we have a second country that has completed a review. So we would be certainly interested in serving on the working group, but I think this needs to be a much more pointed and streamlined process if it's going to provide useful and timely results. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, HSI. I couldn't agree more. I think we shouldn't have processes that take too many years. We want to have rapid action and helpful action for the parties concerned. So I think that would certainly be part of any process that would be developed in that working group. So with this, I think the Animals Committee agrees to the establishment of a joint intersessional working group with the mandate to review the progress updates on the Compliance Assistant Program CAP in document SC74, Doc 29, document COP 19, Doc 30, and resolution Conf 14.3, Ref COP 19 on CITES compliance procedures, and capacity building activities in documents SC74, Doc 22, document COP 19, Doc 16, and resolution Conf 19.2 on capacity building. B, consider whether scientific and management issues identified in the country-wide review of significant trade for Madagascar and outlined in document AC30, Doc 12.3, PC 24, Doc 13.3 are sufficiently addressed through existing mechanisms or, if appropriate, propose amendments to Resolution Conf 12.8, RevCop 18, develop a new resolution or other changes to other existing resolutions or propose a new mechanisms to undertake such reviews. And C, present its findings and recommendations to the joint session of the 33rd meeting of the Animals Committee and 27th meeting of the Plants Committee in 2024. That's the mandate. Now, the representation of standing committee views. Maybe I could ask, luckily that the chair of the standing committee is present, if she sees a way of addressing the consideration of Oceania in that regard. So, United States, chair of the standing committee, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'm a bit surprised. I see the need for the Standing Committee to be involved. I guess I would look to the Secretariat if it is appropriate for me to join the working group, and if so, I would be happy to do so as the Standing Committee Chair, and I'm sure the U.S. is also a member of the working group, can represent their own interests, and I would join as the Standing Committee Chair to follow the proceedings, but I seek their guidance.
Thank you. I will quickly consult with the Secretariat on that matter. I think it's if the United States are member of the working group, it's the United States which are chairing the standing committee, so they can take up that function as United States. Okay, so I will strike the working group. Co-chairs will be myself and Thomas Luteritz, alternate from North America. And members of the Animals Committee who would like to be present. Oceania, I see you want, yeah.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I noticed that the Plants Committee struck the working group as well, and they've got Ms. Smythe as their co-chair.
Yes.
So am I?
I should quickly say who from the Plants Committee what the Plants Committee already formed as members, so that we don't have to double up that. Okay. The chair was Mrs. Smith, and then parties were Canada, DRC, European Union, Germany, Madagascar, Switzerland, UK, and United States. So the United States are already member of that group. And then IGOs and NGOs, it's UNEP WCMC, IUCN, Association Technique Internationale des Bois Tropicaux, Force-Based Solution, Traffic, and WWF. So these are already members of the working group and don't need to repeat. So with this, I open again the floor for members. So Oceania, yes, very good. None other than observer parties that have not been in the group already. I see China. No other parties. Then observer organizations. I see HSI? I think it's SSN, right? Good. Okay, so that concludes the forming of that working group. So thank you very much. And now I will let you go for a slightly early lunchtime. I would like first to give the floor to the Secretariat if we have any announcements to make, maybe which working groups are starting to work at 2 o'clock. So, Secretariat.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Before I move on to the working groups, I just wanted to let you know that the executive summary of your session yesterday is available online in the 3 languages for you to study, and the committee, I believe, will take this up on Thursday morning, so have a look at that. Coming to the working groups, the schedule is on the screens in the room, and this afternoon will be the working group on captive breeding that will meet in this room from 2 to 5, as well as the working group on sharks that will meet upstairs in the room EF, where the site events took place yesterday, also from 2 to 5. And tomorrow, there will be the working groups on review of significant traits starting in this room at 9, and the stony corals will meet in room 9, in room 9 over lunch tomorrow morning as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretariat. So now, good appetite and good work in the coming 2 days.